Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're exploring a truly radical psychological premise. Have you ever felt like you're just kind of stuck in a rut because of where you came from? Or maybe what happened to you in the past? Or even just the way your personality is wired? Well, what if I told you that you could completely change your life and achieve genuine happiness literally instantly? I know, it sounds like complete fantasy, right? But it is actually the core promise of a psychological framework that was honestly 100 years ahead of its time. Okay, let's dive into this, because I really want you to sit with a provocative question for just a second. What if your past has absolutely no control over your present? Like none. Zero. We're going to challenge some deeply held beliefs today, for sure. We are just so used to this narrative that our current struggles are simply echoes of past traumas. But what if that's entirely wrong? What if this idea that we're bound by our past is actually just a convenient excuse we use to avoid the terrifying prospect of change? To answer that, we're drawing from a massive international phenomenon. It's a book called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. This brilliant book actually takes the form of a Socratic dialogue to unpack the teachings of Alfred Adler. Now, you definitely know Freud and you probably know Jung. But Adler? He's widely considered the unknown third giant of early 20th century psychology. And honestly, his ideas were so groundbreaking back then that they still feel incredibly disruptive to us today. Let's start with what we usually consider the accepted truth, which is determinism. This is essentially the Freudian view of the world. It's the idea that our present self is simply the effect of our past trauma and experiences. It basically says, before an effect, there is a cause. So if you're anxious today, well, it's because you were bullied yesterday. If you can't form relationships now, it's because of your parents' divorce in the past. It treats human beings almost like machines, Input equals output. And this brilliantly illustrates a radical crossroads in psychology. On one side, we have Freud's etiology. That's the idea that past causes determine the present. But on the exact opposite side, we have Adler's teleology. This is the radical idea that your present goals actually dictate your behavior. Adler actually split from Freud specifically over this exact issue. He argued that if we're just the products of our past, well, then we are completely powerless. Let's break these down to really understand the difference. Etiology is the study of causation. Think of it like this. If you catch a cold, an etiological doctor says, "Oh, you caught a cold because you went out in the rain yesterday without a coat." In psychiatry, this is the counselor who consoles you by saying, your struggles stem from your difficult childhood, it's really not your fault. And hey, it feels warm and fuzzy to hear that, right? But as Adler points out, as long as we stay in etiology, we don't take a single step forward. We just sit there validating our own suffering. Now, let's completely flip the script and look at Adler's alternative, teleology. This is the study of purpose. The source material shares this fascinating anecdote about a young man who has actually shut himself in his room for years. He suffers from palpitations, and he physically shakes if he even tries to leave. Now, etiology says past trauma caused this fear, trapping him inside. But teleology flips it completely. It says the young man is actually manufacturing the fear and anxiety in order to achieve a specific goal. What goal? The goal of not going outside. Why? Because if he stays inside, his parents worry, he gets their undivided attention, and he avoids the harsh reality of being just an average, unnoticed person out in the real world. So he isn't paralyzed by fear, he's actively using fear as a tool. Which leads us to the central bombshell of this explainer. And honestly, this is perhaps the most uncomfortable concept we'll explore today. Adler absolutely denies the existence of trauma. Yeah, you heard that right. This is a massive cultural sacred cow to slaughter. Freud's idea of psychic wounds causing our current unhappiness is extremely attractive, mainly because it creates this easily understandable, dramatic narrative of our lives. But Adler says no. Listen to how Adler frames this. He says, no experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead we make out of them whatever suits our purposes. Think about that for a second. Adler isn't saying terrible things don't happen or that they don't influence us. Not at all. He is saying that nothing is determined by those influences. We determine our own lives strictly by the meaning we choose to give to those past experiences. So, what does this all mean? The crucial point is, if we're in control of the meaning we assign to our past, what about the present? Are our emotions just uncontrollable impulses that wash over us? Do we really just fly into a rage or fall into despair? Adlerian psychology says absolutely not. It argues that we actually fabricate negative emotions to serve our own purposes. Look at this step-by-step example from the source text. Picture a mother and daughter, and they are just screaming at each other.
The mother is supposedly blind with an uncontrollable rage. Suddenly the phone rings. The mother picks it up, realizes it's her daughter's homeroom teacher, and instantly, like in a fraction of a second, she switches to that sickly sweet customer service voice. She chats politely for 5 minutes, hangs up the phone, and immediately goes right back to screaming at her daughter. What does that prove? It proves anger is a fabricated tool. It's not an uncontrollable impulse. It's a weapon you can instantly sheath when the phone rings and draw right back out when you hang up. The source material features another great anecdote. A man gets his nice jacket spilled on by a waiter at a coffee shop, and he just screams at him. He claims he couldn't help it, that he absolutely blew his top. But Adler argues the man fabricated the anger to force the waiter to submit to him, basically bypassing the normal, more tedious process of explaining the problem and asking for an apology. He wanted instant submission, so he used the tool of anger. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Adler deals with the whole concept of personality. Because if we control our emotions and our goals, why do we feel so fundamentally wired a certain way? Well, Adler replaces the fixed, rigid word personality with the word lifestyle. Lifestyle is simply your tendencies of thought and action. It's how you see the world and how you see yourself.
Now, you might be wondering, wait, I didn't choose to be an anxious or pessimistic person. Well, Adlerian psychology suggests that you actually did. Sometime around the age of 10, you unconsciously chose your lifestyle. And yes, it was heavily influenced by your environment, your parents, your background, but ultimately you actively chose this specific way of interacting with the world because at the time you deemed it beneficial to you. You decided it was the absolute best way to navigate your surroundings. So if we chose it, why don't we just change it when we're unhappy? Why do we stay stuck? Well, the harsh truth is, it's just easier. We loudly complain that we want to change, but deep down, we repeatedly make the active decision not to. Why? Because your current lifestyle, even if it makes you miserable, is familiar. It's like driving an old, broken-down car. Sure, it rattles, but you know exactly how to maneuver it. Choosing a new lifestyle means stepping into the unknown. It means facing severe anxiety and the very real possibility of failure. People just prefer the comfort of an old, familiar unhappiness over the anxiety of an unknown future. But here is where this philosophy becomes incredibly empowering and, honestly, deeply optimistic. Adler said the important thing is not what one is born with, but what use one makes of that equipment. It is not about replacement. It is about renewal. You don't need to be reborn as someone else. You don't have to become the charismatic extrovert or the genius. You just need to renew how you're using the equipment you already have. To do this, we have to escape what Adler calls the realm of possibility. The source text gives a perfect example of this. A young man who dreams of being a novelist but claims his job keeps him way too busy to write. By never writing, he never enters competitions. By never entering, he never gets rejected. He gets to live comfortably in this realm of possibility, telling himself, oh, I could be a great writer if I just had the time. Changing your lifestyle means tearing down that exact excuse. It means sitting down, actually writing the book, and risking the harsh reality of rejection. And you have to do this right now. Why? Because in Adler's radical view, the past literally does not exist. We can't travel back in a time machine, right? Therefore, life is decided strictly in the here and now. Your past trauma is just baggage. It only has weight if you choose to pick it up and carry it around with you. You can, at this exact moment, simply choose to put it down. Which brings us to our final takeaway, and the ultimate question you really have to ask yourself. Do you have the courage to be happy? Adlerian psychology isn't about lacking competence or being a victim of your environment. The whole shebang boils down to courage. You are not unhappy because of your past. You are unhappy because you lack the courage to choose a new lifestyle today. You have the absolute power to change instantly. The only thing standing in your way is your own fear of stepping out of the familiar. So, do you have the courage to take that step? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a completely new lens through which to view your own potential.